Welcome to my early review of Solace. Now, disclaimer, this is built off of a prototype, so this is not final anything, and it's not the whole game, but I do have some insights I want to share with you guys. Okay, now I want to point out how limited the gameplay is here with the prototype specifically. You see, this game is suggested to play during a campaign. In the campaign, you'll be going through different missions, through different raids, through different cutscenes, stuff like that, and you'll be upgrading your people with upgrade cards. I did not see pretty much most of that. So this is one mission that we're doing, and that's it. So you don't really get to see the continuation or the upgrade. That being said, I do have the upgrade cards here, so I can take a look at what I could get, and I could see how I could get them, about how often maybe I could get them, and kind of derive some sort of idea of what the campaign will be like at that point. So, what is Solace? Solace is a new game by Lunar Oak Studios. It is a card game. It plays a lot like Oko. I'll talk about Oko Chronicles. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's a sci-fi game, anime kind of game that has a lot of different inspirations I'll talk about over time. Essentially, though, you play as these people that you then go and take on bad guys, rescue civilians, uncover mysteries and plots and stuff like that, all through these little cutscenes where your characters are talking to each other and you guys do different things and whatnot. So you're going through these missions. The missions have these little cards, and they tell you when you unlock different cutscenes, or they might introduce a card or two or something like that. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then at the end of the mission, you escape out of this area, which is called the Palace. Meanwhile, there's a timer and reinforcements that come in, and so on and so forth. So a quick synopsis of how you play the game, but just very quickly, is you take your cards that you have, and you pick two of them. You have a left side and a right side, and you slot them underneath your card like so. And this has you doing the left and the right side. Additionally, on the back, you can always use it to move around if you so wish. So that's where it's kind of like Oko Chronicles, in the sense that you're having to pick on this card which one of the two actions available that you can do, and you're covering up the other half, essentially, right? Meanwhile, you do have a left-hand side and a right-hand side and stuff like that. So that's where it's kind of like that, but really that's where the similarities end. As you do two, you discard them, you don't get those back right away, so that you can't ever use the same card twice, that sort of thing. Meanwhile, you're going through this palace, which is 5 levels of cards, and as you move around in here and, go from floor to floor, you uncover turrets, or you uncover civilians, or you uncover, soldiers or bad guys or whatever, and you have to deal with that, whoever's essentially on your floor. Now, there are even some symbols here in this prototype that's not in the rule book that I was handed, so I just kind of omitted those, essentially. Those are probably just, more advanced rules, essentially, on different things you can do. But suffice it to say, you can attack, you can rescue civilians, you can do electrical attacks, you can recover people, you can evade attacks, you can investigate to look through different cards, you can move around on the floor to move cards around that way. I'll explain that in a little bit. And you just go through trying to do your mission and then escaping, essentially. In this first one, you have to go through, there's a silent alarm, but it can go into red alert, essentially, and that just makes things harder. And you're trying to get some data and then leave the data. In the meantime, a sub-objective would be to get 3 or more civilians. More civilians, the better. Those are victory points, which lets you upgrade later. So that's kind of what you're doing, but you can kind of leave the palace early if you want to as well. In fact, you could leave it right at the beginning if you wanted to too, and just fail the mission. So it's kind of interesting in that sense. And again, definitely some inspiration from some other stuff. We'll talk about that. Okay, so that is kind of the synopsis of the game. Very quick, loosey-goosey, but you kind of get an idea what's going on. I think the world setting is really cool. I do like the sci-fi, I do like the anime. The characters are kind of over the top and how they talk to each other. Again, very much like anime, so that makes sense. They definitely have strong personalities that it kind of hints at and stuff like that. That being said, it's not super story heavy. Even though it has these like really cool visual novel cutscenes, it's not like you're reading a ton of stories. It's not like a Madara or something like that, where you just have like a huge amount of story in between. It's not really that much. That being said, the world is intriguing. It's just an interesting concept. Essentially, you discover nanomachines, and then the people get infected, and then it spreads, and then it makes it to where you live forever. But then if people live forever, there's too many people, and so then you have to like have an excuse to live past 100 years, or they like kill you or something, or like it's this crazy world, right? And then some people are like fully mechanical, and you know the typical kind of stuff. It's kind of a Ghost in the Shell-ish in a way, in that sense. Very, very cool. I liked it. I like the character designs and kind of the world that you're doing with mega corporations and stuff like that. A little Shadowrunny even. Definitely something that I liked. Now, as cool as that is, and again, this is a prototype, but I feel like a lot of board game worlds, this is me being critical. So I am somebody who actually reads books. I am somebody who watches movies and experiences video games and does all this other media where stories are involved. And the stories in board games aren't always told the best way. A lot of it is because the main majority of the focus is on gameplay in a game, not necessarily the story. Some of it's the format and the pacing, but some of it's just, are you a good storyteller or not? Or are you good at like creating a world or not? And that's a very hard thing to do. This one seemed like it was definitely getting there. Obviously, they don't naturally write in English, so it is a little bit of a translation. There are a few things that always kind of snap me out of these kind of things. So, like, for instance, at one point, the story talks about how the economy is in shambles and it's like everything's super expensive, right? And because, you know, you can just live forever and keep progressing money and stuff like that. If if you're always supposed to grow in mega corporations and stuff like that. And then it talks about a millionaire, and these people know this millionaire guy, like the millionaire is like important. Millionaires aren't even really important in like today's society, unless a far-flung future where prices skyrocket. I mean, a millionaire at this point is almost an average Joe. I mean, like, there's probably 1,000 millionaires in most big cities easily, if not more. So it's one of those things where now it's like billionaires, and now we're getting into trillion-dollar companies. Eventually, it might be trillionaires, and it's just the fact that these people would know like a millionaire just doesn't match the world setting that they had already kind of established in my mind. And it's little things like that I kind of notice in board games in general. But in this one, obviously I noted it, so I wanted to kind of let you know they're obviously still working it out. I don't know exactly how well it'll come out in the end. Now, another thing, and this is again one of those complaints that I have with a lot of board games. So I typically say this, and you'll hear me say this a lot, but the characters don't inherently feel different. This happens almost 100% of the time when you're dealing with symbols. So any game, if you think of a card game or a board game or something like that has symbols instead of words, typically I will have this as something to say, and it's something I always kind of note is playing Sybil and playing Tora don't feel any different. We're not doing anything unique. We're doing the same things. He might shoot or like attack more often than her, but either way they're both attacking, and they're attacking in the exact same way, doing the exact same things. You have X amount of symbols, and those symbols are your actions, and that's what everybody does. Everybody does that. It's just, it doesn't matter the character, you're doing that. There are a few that are unique. For instance, there's a character that has a bigger attack that also sets off the alarm, and okay, that's a little different, I guess. But even then, you're still just laying cards left, laying cards right, and they do just about the same thing. There is one exception here, and this is actually Sybil. Sybil has this thing where she can start on the top floor or the first floor. So she's actually up here. Normally, everybody starts at the bottom of the palace. So that is something slightly different, but it's something done at the very beginning of the game. And then, of course, the game plays, and whether you're playing Tora or Sybil, you're doing the exact same things. You're attacking bad guys with your little left card attack things, or you're moving around with your right card, or you're evading with that. There's a few unique things. For instance, she has a card here that allows her to evade on the left, which is pretty abnormal. Most don't have that. But again, it doesn't feel any different, if that makes sense. So this is something I noticed. And again, you can pretty much guarantee I'm going to say that in any review on any card game that has symbols in it. When you use words, when you use an expansive language, you can do all sorts of fancy stuff, right? Or if you built in abilities on the card themselves that made Tora unique or made Sybil unique beyond just start, top or bottom, that's where that uniqueness comes in. But they don't really have that, so it's really just cards left, right, doing the same things as everybody else. Now, again, this is limited on the prototype and the Kickstarter. They might introduce characters that you have unique symbols that only they can do, so maybe they can heal or something like that. We'll get into damage and healing in a little bit. Now, I mentioned the Oko Chronicles thing, and it's because I love it. I love getting a card and having to choose between two different options. One of my favorite things to do, no, it's not just Oko Chronicles. A lot of times you'll have a top-bottom, or you'll have a card this way and this way, and it's flipped. There's a lot of different ways game designers do it to have one card essentially be a trade-off. So the cost is the action you didn't do, right? And that's what's kind of cool here is if I do this attack because I want to do the attack, it means I am not getting this double move. And so having that on your cards and making that decision and that cost is a personal favorite of mine in card games. It's something I very much enjoy, and so I do kind of like that. It does make sense. Now, another thing is, in this game at least, a lot of the things, for instance, most attacks are on the left. Most evades are on the right. Most moves are on the right. So getting a move on the left or getting an evade on the left, for instance, of the right, or an attack on the right is abnormal, and you kind of value those cards a bit more. So there is definitely some play there that you can really kind of enjoy. It's not, quite as mindless as symbols might lead you to believe. They're very smart in how they order those and organize those, which is, kind of cool. Now, going back on the inspiration of this, right? I get a lot of Persona 5 on this. For instance, it's anime, so there's that. Obviously, you're going through a palace, right? That sounds very familiar as well. So the palace in particular makes it kind of interesting to me. And even like going as far as you can into the palace and then maybe leaving early, that's again something that's there. Now, of course, there's a lot of other things, right? Like the visual novel style cutscenes and stuff like that. But I do get a big sense of some of the inspirations almost putting it on their sleeves, and you can either like that or not. I liked it. I think that's cool. I like going through palaces, and it reminds me of Persona 5 and going through palaces that way and trying to, get some people in an escape or something like that. So that's kind of cool too. But no, in general, I did like the theme and do like the fact that it kind of harkens to some of my favorite games too. Now, these cutscenes are actually a pretty neat idea, mainly because it introduces story within the mission, but on top of that, like I said, it can introduce things. So for instance, you might finally get to a room. Let's say this was the room card that I need to get to instead of a turret that's going to shoot me, right? So that's I finally found like the data room or whatever. But before I do that, I have to read the cutscene because it says reveal the data card to unlock the start of the cutscene. So then I read the cutscene, and the cutscene says to add the soldier and hacker. So suddenly these people that I met in the cutscene are now added there, and they're going to act differently. They're actually going to start running away. So they're actively leaving the palace instead of, following us or something like that. And then once we defeat them, then another cutscene happens, right? Because then it says here that after you defeat the hacker and get the data, you read that cutscene. So then you do that. Or you're going around and then you finally get 3 civilians, and then what do you know? This says rescue at least 3 civilians. Did you see that? But you don't necessarily have to do that either. Some of these things are extra, some are not. You can lose civilians too. If you don't save them in time, they can die, and those actually count against you. So the cutscenes really add a lot of variety. Again, this is only one mission. I imagine the other missions do stuff like this, so and I'm excited to see what they can do with the structure of inserting cards on here like that. The only time that happens is with reinforcements, which is another thing I really liked. So this is essentially a timer, obviously, right? And every turn, you're moving these off. But once the red alert happens, these start coming on, and they are introduced at a different spot. So some of them might be introduced on the first floor, some of them on the top floor, some of them right where you are. They're going to go to the nearest person and they're going to go get them. Some of them, for instance, this guy will attack twice and then go to the top floor. Some of them might, like there was one that was kind of cool. He actively moves towards people and then, so this guy right here, he's going to move to the closest person, top being preferred, then attack, and then start moving to the top floor. So he might move several times, right, as he's introduced there. Meanwhile, he's going on the board and, changing up what you were trying to do if you're trying to get to a room, and he covers up that room. Well, now you have to deal with him before you can, unsound the alarm or whatever you're wanting to do there. So that was pretty cool. I did like that as well. Also, when it comes to like the civilians and stuff like that, there's a loot pile that goes here as you, I think this one was a civilian. So if you got this person, you saved them, they're in their loot pile, it naturally tracks essentially your points. So you don't have to like fuss with that afterwards, which is also kind of nice as well. I imagine, considering defeated cards also go here, that that's involved in some missions as well. But in this first one, it was mainly just civilians it was tracking. Now, this is something I always think is kind of fun when there's kind of an abstract level to movement. And so when you move, you can move up and down the palace as essentially like a tower, right? As you go to the top of the tower or to the bottom of the tower where the exit is. But you can also move within the same area. So let's say that this turret appears, right? And I don't want to deal with that. I want to search more. I'm going to run away from this turret and like look in another hallway or whatever. I can use a movement to essentially move within that, which then puts it on the bottom face up, and then the next one's revealed. Oh no, it was a laser trap. Not very good. Maybe I need to deal with that. And I need to deal with that by doing 2 electrical attacks, because if I don't, then on the palace turn, it's going to actually sound the alarm and then go away. And then it would go away, and then the next one would reveal. And oh, it's a wanderer. He's going to move around and do different stuff. So you can actively kind of move around on the same level as well, and you're cycling through these cards dealing with something. So first I found a turret, and then I ran off and got into a laser room. I disabled the laser room, but now there's a wanderer kind of going around. So that sort of abstractness works actually pretty well here, and I actually kind of liked it. That was kind of cool. I dug the fact that I could walk around in the same level and actively use that. Now, you run the risk of those turrets, for instance, they'll shoot the moment they see you, right? And so that's not good. You don't have enough time to react to that. But there's other ways to do that. You can investigate to see what's there and kind of sneak around more. So there's all sorts of different things you can do in that regard. The reinforcements I did really like, because otherwise you could really kind of gamify this, I feel, a bit. But these guys, they move different, they're introduced, so if once the alert comes on and these guys start pouring in, you can't really deal with them and do the mission at the same time. You have a very limited time before they'll start overrunning things, pretty much. Unless you're doing really good, and maybe you're on top of things, but it definitely becomes more difficult. So by the time the red alert happens, you pretty much just need to start booking it out of there before they really get a huge amount in there. Because again, they just come in there, and eventually there's stacks of top-facing cards, so you just have to keep dealing with stuff, or they're going to keep interacting and keep reacting. So I really liked the reinforcements. I thought it was a smart use of the timer, to not just be a timer, but instead also these guys coming in. All right, now this is something I noticed, okay? So this game is very reliant on evades, and the reason is because the way damage works is extremely punishing. It's bad, okay? So you get these evades, and the evade essentially allows you to evade a attack. So for instance, this guy here, he moves, he attacks, he moves. You would evade this attack essentially, right? So that attack you didn't get hurt. If you don't do that, and remember, you only have 2 actions. So if you do anything other than something plus evade, you run this risk of getting hurt, right? Now, if there's multiple people, only one person needs to be evaded there. But when that happens, so you have 6 cards, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 cards. You remove one of those from the game. It's gone. It's out of there, at least for this mission. You'll recover them at the end. So now you only have 5. And then you only have, and this guy, for instance, he does 2 damage. If he came on or moved the way you didn't think so, or something happened, right? You didn't have evades down, and then somebody trips the alarm, and so now this is going here. He's going to do 2. That means you remove 2 cards, right? So then you're only left with 4. So you play 2, and then you only have 2 on the next one. So with 1 attack, you've lost 2 of your 6. You play 2 each turn. So it's literally just which 2 are you pretty much cycling through at that point. If you lose 1 more, if you get hit 3 times, which again can happen even in 1 hit, there's a few guys here that will attack multiple times. For instance, this guy here, he has a 2 attack and a 1 attack. If you don't dodge his thing, even if you dodge 1, you're getting hurt 1. If you don't dodge both, you get 3 damage. 3 damage leaves you with 3 cards. There will be, every other turn, you won't even be doing 2 moves. You'll only be doing 1 move. It hurts a lot. Now, what that typically means is teamwork, right? So if you have multiple people on the same row, you can divvy up the attacks. One person can have evade, one person didn't. If there was 1 attack there, they evaded the attack. It's slightly deterministic in that if you see the guy there and you haven't dealt with him, you know he's going to attack. So there's a few ways to mitigate that. However, when it comes to having multiple people, the more players, the better in this sense. I think it just doesn't scale quite as good as I would like it. With 2 players, you're either going turtling with each other or you run the risk of not being able to evade. And there's people that just don't evade a whole lot, right? I mean, like, he only has 2 evades. So it doesn't really work out too well, right? You will get damaged, which is fine. It kind of limits you and makes you leave sooner. But I feel with more players, more abilities to be able to dodge that, because these don't really scale. I mean, it slightly does in the sense that, there's more people, there's more cards to get through and stuff like that. And the timer doesn't really accommodate nearly as much, but it's still just 1 attack. And so if you have even just a 3rd person or a 4th person, I feel the gameplay is a bit smoother. With 2, you're going to get almost dead most of the time if you're trying to do like the save the 3 civilians. Brings me to one other point. It is kind of inherently random in a lot of ways, right? I mean, so, like for instance, I think the alarm room or the data was in one of these top 3. So I knew it wasn't in the bottom 2 because I had to make the decks, right? So I knew it was one of these 3, and they're from all the remainder ones, and it'll be like, oh, add this to there and mix it up. But that also does mean it could be the top card, it could be the bottom card. You could have an easier time in this mission or a worse time in this mission. It isn't... through a campaign, that kind of averages out typically that you could have a really bad run or a really easy run. So it's not as fine-tuned of a balance as I think card games can be, just because the moment you're making decks like that, often it is a little bit random. I had the same thing with the tile sets in Bloodborne, right? It's the exact same sort of thing where it could be easy, it could be bad. You don't know where it is in that. Part of that's kind of fun, but part of it also means that you could just have a really hard time. All those civilians are on the bottom. Like, well, good luck saving them all. Versus all the civilians are on the top, in which case, hey, that was an easy mission. So just go into it knowing that. All right, so let's talk about these upgrades a little bit. Now again, I didn't play with them, right? But I can look at them, and I did. I looked through all of them. They are pretty powerful. Like this one. Now, 2 evades on the right. That's not bad. That's pretty good. This one moved twice in evade, or this one now moving 3 times, or I'm searching 4 times now, right? And I have a help on the right. Normally it's on the left, right? So again, a more unique card. So they definitely do upgrade things. Now, I'm not really noticing any new symbols. So at least in the ones that I looked through, there's not really a lot of like, oh, now I can do this new mechanic or this new thing, which kind of makes sense because you can upgrade them as you see fit, as you get points, as opposed to you don't get that. So you get that like, for the very second mission, and maybe that doesn't even make sense that mission, I don't know. So the upgrades do seem quite powerful and definitely meaningful. With more upgraded cards, you will be playing better, just pretty much straight benefits, because more symbols means more things to do, right? If that makes sense. But it's not like you're doing whole new moves like in a dungeon crawl or something like that. So overall, I find this to actually be a pretty fun little game. As long as the price is right, I think it's quite good. It doesn't take up a big space. Obviously, this is a prototype, right? But either way, it sets up on a coffee table this size. Even a 4-player easily would set up on a coffee table this size. So it doesn't take up a lot of space, either on your shelf, in your backpack, on the table. It plays pretty quick thanks to the timer. There's not really a whole lot of stuff to do there. And because you're just picking 2 things, it's not like you get AP really bad. No, there's a combination of things like maybe you can move up and attack that person, and then I can move down, right? Because you can change your scenarios that way, but it plays pretty quick. It's a fun little card game. I had some fun with it. As long as the price is right, I think it could be pretty darn interesting. And it plays different than a lot of other card games you get. Also, it's pretty solo friendly because playing 2 people, picking 4 cards each time, not very hard at all. Pretty darn easy. So definitely soloable as well, which I know a lot of you are kind of interested in also. So anyway, that's it. That is Solace by Lunar Oak Studio. It is on Kickstarter now at the time of posting this. No, it's a day off, I believe. So it'll be tomorrow if you're watching the day I posted this. Either way, it's linked down in the description below. Feel free to check it out. And for more news and opinion pieces, of course, those are coming as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye, guys.